Hi everyone, and welcome once again to Does It Make a Difference podcast. And this time the subject matter is retreats. Do retreats make a difference? I'm lucky enough to have with me Dr. Kate Mason, the person behind Women and Wild Retreats. Thanks very much for joining me, Kate.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so the first question, as always, is retreats. Do they really make a difference?
Yes. For many reasons. Retreats can be very powerful, and retreats are about retreating. They're about coming away from the everyday grind. They're coming away from all the things that we have to deal with on a daily basis, all the stresses, all the strains. Retreats do make a difference, but it's important to do your homework and it's important to look and see what they're all about, because retreats can vary from nice relaxing retreat with a bit of yoga and a bit of sort of chilling out, or they can be like Women and Wild retreats, which are a lot more adventurous and really try and push people out of their comfort zones to kind of uncover their power and their resilience that quite often they never knew they had.
Right, okay. So you're concentrating on women, obviously,
Yeah.
but presumably there are retreats for men as well, and they also achieve the same sort of goals or aim
Yeah.
for the same goals.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, Women and Wild focus on women, and that the Women and Wild has come from my own personal experiences. So they're very tailored to women. Men's retreats can have a transformational impact as well.
Right, so let's just look at the reasons for getting the most out of a retreat. Is it predominantly people are just overwhelmed with their life and everything it's throwing at us these days?
I think life is very stressful nowadays, and we are constantly bombarded with this sort of negative chatter of we have to be good enough, we have to be one step ahead of everything day to day. You know, what do the kids need next? Where's my next career progression coming from? Where's my next job coming from? That sort of thing. And it is constant. You know, it's very difficult to hop off that hamster wheel and really take some time to just think about, what do you need? And I always say, you can't drive a car on an empty tank. You know, at some point, what can happen if we're not careful is that these sort of niggly little everyday stresses can turn into burnout, chronic stress, and anxiety at worst. And a lot of my clients, as a psychologist, I see lots of clients one-to-one, and one of the biggest issues that we're facing in this day and age is stress, burnout, anxiety, depression. And I think it's because we're constantly living in the future, and to an extent, that kind of is how we have evolved. It goes back to when we used to live outside and we had to be hypervigilant. We had to look for all the what ifs. We had to look for, what if this happens? What if I get, killed by a woolly mammoth walking down the road or something like that? So those were very real threats thousands of years ago when we lived outdoors. But they're not such threats now. Our lives are not at risk when we're going for a job interview, or when we're standing up and doing a presentation, when we're doing a podcast, that sort of thing. But our brains haven't fully evolved. So we naturally think quite negatively, and we have that sort of negative chatter about ourselves.
Well, it's a bit like sort of the fight or flight situation, isn't it? If you can't fight it and you can't run away from it, that's when the stress starts to build up. And from my personal experience and people I know, is that we all, when we sit down together and have an unload, have a good moan, when we try to have a man's retreat in the pub, we're all saying the same thing. You're just bombarded all the time by, the banking, online banking and online insurance and whatever else, all the things that you've got a problem with it, you can't speak to somebody, you can't deal with it, and this tension builds up all the time. So from a man's perspective, I can feel that, and I can hear what you're saying. From a woman's perspective, I would understand that most women, when they have a family, start to lose their identity of who they are. And do you find a lot of people that get the most from the retreat are family orientated?
Mostly. Most women that come on my retreats have got children, and of all ages. So some of my women, their children have left home, and some of them have got very little people in their lives. But it's the mental load, I think, that mums take on. And again, it's going back to that sort of everyday little stresses of, what do the kids need next? Have they got the right uniform on? Is it a non-school uniform day to day, or, bake sales and all that kind of thing? And it all adds up and it all mounts up. And those little tiny everyday stresses that on their own seem like nothing, when they start mounting up and it starts to snowball, so many people just get to that point where the wheels fall off and it's just burnout, stress. And, obviously we put our children before ourselves. And I think in this society now we are so focused on everybody else that quite often we forget about what we want and what we need as women. And that's not to say men don't do that as well, obviously, but, women particularly, I think, just want to be, there's a lot of pressure on us from society that we have to be the best at what we do. And, we are now working more and we're expected to parent like we don't work and work like we don't parent. And back, years ago, my grandmother didn't work. She brought up the children. But, as generations go by, we're expected to do both. And it's just too much plate spinning. So many women come on my retreats because they just want to get some time out for themselves. We focus a lot on values in our retreats as well, and the importance of values. So values are like a little bit of a roadmap of life. So when we're aligning ourselves to what matters and we're doing what matters, life feels okay. We can kind of roll with the punches when things like little obstacles kind of come in day to day. But when we are not aligned to our values and we start to come away from them, that's when mental health can start to struggle. We get anxious, we start to get low, we start to think, I don't even know what I want anymore. And the amount of women that come to me and say, what makes me sad is that I don't know what I enjoy anymore. I don't know what I like anymore. My spark's gone because I've spent so long putting everybody else first. I don't even know what sparks joy. So the retreats are an opportunity to take that step back and think, right, what do I need? What do I enjoy? Because then not only is that energy that you're gaining from that retreat going to be beneficial for you, but it's going to be beneficial for the people around you. People around you are going to feel that as well.
So find your joy again.
Absolutely.
Okay, so talk me through then. You've got a group of people that have obviously come to you, a group of women, and they've got their different situations, but it sounds like they'll all have a fairly similar story. Yeah. How long does it take for them to start to explore that joy?
It depends. I like to meet the women that come on my retreats a few weeks before. And that's something that we're very much incorporating this year on our October retreat, our wildfire retreat. So I get to know each individual person well and get them to really think about setting an intention when they come to the retreat. So we do a bit of legwork before, we do some values work and ask them what they want to focus on. Some women want to focus on their career. Some want to focus on purely themselves and they want to understand where they want to go with either. But what's nice is that everyone's got slightly different issues that they might want to work on or different intentions. But there's something so powerful about bringing a bunch of women together to normalise what they're feeling. And, women cheer women on like they're at the Olympics. It's, when we do the firewalk part of our retreat, that comes right at the very end. So they've done a whole day of really digging deep and really trying to uncover and explore their barriers and things that are holding them back and that sort of thing. We come to the firewalk at the end and they are screaming for each other to walk across those coals. And it's brilliant. For some women, it's been transformational. I've had quite a few women that have phoned me afterwards and said, it's totally changed my mindset. I had these barriers that were holding me back and I've felt I've able to push through them and now I'm doing X. So it's not just on the retreat that the benefits are felt, it's long lasting. And that's my intention, is to make sure that these women go away with something tangible that they can then put into their lives. Because it's not just about walking on coals. Yes, it's great, how fun, and also terrifying. But also it's a metaphor for being able to push past barriers. And the essence of Women in Wild Retreats is push yourself right to the edge of your comfort zone, because you don't know. We like to live very, safe lives. We don't like to challenge ourselves too much. We like things to be linear and safe. But when we push ourselves to the edge, we can really discover what we're made of. And I think that's really empowering for people.
So I was going to say, as you've alluded there, what's the follow-up process? Presumably you don't, as you say, leave people cold at the end of it. You must contact them a few times and see if they've maintained their new direction.
Yeah, Yeah. So most of the women we're in like a WhatsApp group, but also afterwards this year particularly we're actually going to be incorporating more sort of Zoom calls and individual calls just to have that bit of accountability as well, because it's not magic. You put in, you get out of a retreat what you put in, but we want to make sure that there is that bit of accountability. So if people know that I'm going to be ringing saying, right, what have you done off the back of what you discovered on the retreat, I think that kind of keeps it going.
Have you got any stories of people that have done something particular that's notable?
Yeah, we've had a couple of women. One woman in particular, actually, she had been in like the corporate world for a very long time, and she'd always wanted to step outside and do something supporting other women who'd experienced cancer in some way, shape, or form. And something was always holding her back, and she didn't know what. So obviously she came on the retreat, she did a lot of work, and she phoned me afterwards and she said, I've realised I've always had a voice in my head and I've always assumed that it's my voice saying, you're not good enough, you can't do this, it'll go wrong. And she said, I realised on the retreat that voice was my mum's. And she just said, I realised it wasn't mine. I assumed it was me, just knowing that my limits and knowing that I couldn't possibly do something like that. But she realised it was her mum's, and it was coming from a good place, because mum had always been in this had this sort of linear progression in the same career, wanted her to get a pension and that sort of thing. Don't deviate, just stay in the same job. But with that knowledge that she gained on that retreat, she was able to sort of acknowledge that mum's voice, and still push past that and still be able to do it. And it was great because now she's flying. She has quit that corporate job and she has set something up now, and she's doing really, really well.
Oh,
so
brilliant.
it feels it's great for her, but it feels great for me because this is a passion project. It's not my main job, as you know. My main job is as a clinical psychologist. So, but what I did notice there were so many burnt out women that just didn't know who they were anymore. And I
Do you think social media's got needs to take some responsibility for that burning out?
Yeah, I think so.
Expectations and what everybody else is doing, and you're not, you're always failing, as it were.
We're always comparing. And again, that goes back to caveman times when we used to live outside. We had to compare, one family to another because it was survival of the fittest. But now, you can't get away from it. It's 24 hours. I mean, I'm guilty of it. I'll doom scroll and I'll see what other people are doing and think, I could never do it that well. Or you see these parenting blogs that are just sort of like, pack your child's lunchbox with, cucumbers shaped into stars. I'm like, mine are going to get a bag of Twiglets if they're lucky. So, and I think it's so difficult to pull away from that. And that's one thing, again, on the retreats is I try and say, put your phones away. If you need to contact home and say you're all right, then fair enough. Luckily, in the woodland where we stay, there's not a lot of signal. But it's just coming away from that because it's just constantly filling that space in our head. I mean, I'm guilty of it as well. But sometimes, even when I get that rare moment to sit down and have a cuppa, I'll pick up my phone and start doing something. We always feel like we've got to be doing something. And retreats are just that. It's just retreating from life and just saying, right, I'm going to focus purely on me and I'm not going to feel guilty about it either. Mum guilt is a real thing. It's horrible.
Yeah, I blame the parents. Always blame the parents. It's always a good excuse. But I've heard that many a time that the little devil on your shoulder, when you start to listen to what it's saying and how it's saying it, recognise that it actually isn't your voice, it's somebody else's. Yeah. And you rightly say, I mean, I personally had an experience where I realised that some of the things that I was personally feeling negative about, it wasn't me. It was the expectations placed upon me at a very early age, which I hadn't remembered until a particular moment. It affects us all. So tell me about your retreats then. So women turn up with a tarpaulin and a sleeping bag and they
it's a bit more glamorous than that, Bob.
Okay, come on, sell it to me.
We stay in this beautiful woodland in the Cotswolds in Broadway. Right. And the accommodation is it's simple, but it's really cosy and warm. These little sort of wooden kind of huts. And we are literally out in the middle of nowhere. So there's something very metaphorical about just leaving life behind, just to come in. And the moment you step into this woodland, it's just magical. It's just lovely. It's all sort of fairy lit in the evening. And so people arrive on the Friday. We go off to the local pub on the Friday night.
Because not a good start.
So we go to the local pub just to kind of get to know each other and just sort of get out and about and have a meal. And then we come back, and it's a very it almost feels like a giant girly sleepover, but also with some kind of, you know, some legwork in there as
Some
well.
structure. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. So the first night is very sort of chilled, and then the next day we do breath work in the morning, which is incredibly powerful. So that's a lot about releasing pent up emotions, not just sort of emotions that are on the surface, but quite often it can dig quite deep and it can really get some, you know, I've personally done some breath work before now, and experienced this sort of this anger that I didn't know I had in me, and it was just this way of releasing it. So we start women off by, let's get all that kind of out and up to the surface, and, you know, so we do that, and then we have our lovely guy Keith that comes in from Steps for You, and he comes in and does this wonderful program with all our women. So the women already have a bit of an idea and an intention of what they want to work on, and then we then use that for the rest of the day to guide various sort of activities and
Like,
sort of
these are
mindset
physical
work.
activities or mental activities?
Both.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Very
So
mysterious.
I do lots of sort of workshops about mindset. I do a
Okay.
lot of work about values and helping women to uncover what their values are, and encouraging them to sort of think about how they can take those values out into the world, and try and sort of, you know, put them into their own lives. And then in between that, we do we glass walk. So we walk on broken glass. Which again, so the sort of reason behind the glass walking is about when you put your foot down, when you move into something in your life, when you're sort of making a decision to do something, the sort of metaphor about walking on broken glass is that if it doesn't feel right, if you put your foot down, it doesn't quite feel right, it's okay to take it back off and find a different way. So that's how you get from one end to the other on the glass walking. Wow. Is if it doesn't quite feel right underfoot, it's okay to just take that step back, take a breather and find a different route. So we do that. And then it works up then to the fire walking, which happens at the end. And it's just spectacular because we've obviously got that dark backdrop. It happens at night. And you can just see this beautiful sort of glow of the embers. Everyone's fired up because we've done loads of.
Is this all on the same day, or you're talking?
Yeah, it's all on the same day.
Wow,
So it's
okay.
yes, it's a packed day. It really is jam packed. Yeah. But we want women to sort of, you know, there's plenty of downtime as well. So, you know, we can go off. I do a journaling session so people can sort of write about their experiences while they're on the retreat. And there's some time, so, you know, we can go for sort of sunrise walks as well. So there's lots of time to sort of just sit and relax. But these are adventure retreats. This is about stepping outside your comfort zone and trying something that you never normally would.
Right.
So it culminates in this sort of fire walk at the end. And again, it's about breaking through barriers. All your instincts are going to be telling you, don't put your foot down on a hot coal. Why would you do that? But it's about sometimes just breaking through those barriers. So that, again, the experiences on the retreat are something that you can then take and map out into your own personal lives. Because we have so many barriers. There's so many reasons why we shouldn't do something, why we shouldn't make that decision. So we do that. And then at the end this year, we've got a live singer that comes in, and we have a big party afterwards, big celebratory kind of party around the fire pit. Some marshmallows and some fizz, because, you know, why not, to celebrate. And yeah, we've got a live singer coming into the woods with his guitar, so we can have, it's like a bit of a festival feel towards the end.
And presumably people stay over the second night, they don't.
Yeah, it's 2
back.
nights. And then on the Sunday morning, we do a beautiful sound bath that will kind of left us, just kind of brings it all together really, and lets us sort of drift off sort of around about lunchtime. So lots of stuff going on, but there is that element of relaxation. Obviously, we want people to feel relaxed. We want people to be out of their fight flight and into that kind of zone where they can actually reflect. Because that's and what's beautiful is that I see women coming in on the Friday and they're like this. They're in their fight flight zone. They're in that midbrain. They're in that sort of emotional kind of brain where it's I'm so het up all the time. And we know that if you are in your fight flight zone for long enough, that's where the chronic stress can kind of build up really, you know. And ironically, what we need to do when we're feeling stressed is to be able to think logically and rationally. But the part of our brain that is responsible for being able to plan, to be able to reason with our emotions, to be able to problem solve, to think straight, all that kind of, that shuts down. We know that cortisol, which is like a stress hormone, when people are chronically stressed, it floods that part of the brain. So we can't think straight. I don't know if you've ever, when you've ever felt, when you feel stressed or really angry or uptight about something, quite often we can't see the wood for the trees. We can't think properly about what's going on. So it's so nice when these women come in like that and then just watch them kind of come down, and you can see that rational brain starts coming in and they start to reflect then. And that's where growth comes from, when we can really tap into who are we? What do we need in order to get on in our lives and live our lives the way we want to live?
Going back to your breath work at the beginning there, I've always found that when I've done sort of yoga and something similar, my mind is still thinking, I've really got to get back and I've got to do so and so, and I must pop in and pick up such and such or whatever. How long does it take your guests to stop doing that and actually concentrate on the breathing? Because obviously I know it's fairly intense, but my mind is forever racing about, I've got to do this, got to edit that, got to chop that out, got to call these people. Always found it a bit of a problem to stop doing it.
Yeah, it is difficult. And it's difficult. It's more difficult for some than others. And it kind of depends how stressed you are as well. Some people can just come in and just go, boom, drop the bags. Right, I'm here. Off. But for some, it's like almost waiting for a spinning top to sort of slow down. It can take a while. But the thing about breath work and almost like mindfulness is what you were kind of talking about just there, is that it's not about completely switching off. It's about recognising that sometimes our thoughts do go to the future or they do go to the past, and just acknowledging them and then being able to sort of let them go. If we go in with the intention of clearing our mind, you can start getting stressed about that and think, well, my mind's not cleared, my eyes are shut, but my mind's not clear because I'm thinking, so it does take a while. And that's why my retreats are 2 nights, because I think day retreats have got a place, and I do run some day retreats. I do sort of corporate away days as well for people. But I think to really appreciate and really embrace and really come out of that fight-flight zone, I think it does take a while. And that's why we go out on the Friday night. I don't try and do anything particularly heavy on that first night, because it is just about connecting with the fact that we're here together now. We're here as a little small community, and we're going to be here for each other for the rest of the week, and just allows people to just calm down that little bit. I know from experiences of when I've gone away on a girly weekend, for example, I get to that second night and that's when I just go, Or it's a bit like when you're on holiday, sometimes it takes a week to unwind, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it can take a while.
Yeah, yeah. So, you would say then obviously retreats do make a difference then? I
would. And I think certainly because it's so difficult for us to actually take that time out, because there's always something else we should do. So it's those shoulds, and I could do this and I ought to do that. So retreats really are just providing people with the opportunity to just come away, to reset and to really think about what they need. Because like I said before, if you just keep going, you can't fire. You can't be the person that you want. You can't be the mum that you want to be. You can't be the partner that you want to be. You can't be the employee that you want to be. If you're that fired up.
Yeah, yeah. And how many of these a year do you do?
So at the moment, I just do one big one a year, and then I do some smaller kind of adventures. So last year I did a paddleboarding retreat as well, which was brilliant. And again, lots of metaphors about going down and we went down the River Wye, and it threw it down. 1 minute it was glorious sun, and we were all jumping off the boards and swimming in the river. The next minute, you couldn't see each other for rain. But again, lots of really powerful kind of metaphors for that. So that was a 1 night, 2-day adventure. And we do some day ones as well. We're doing a lot more sort of this year as well. But it's one big retreat a year, because they're huge to organise, and I want to make sure that everybody gets individual treatment as well as that kind of group ethos as well.
Good, yeah. Okay, well, I mean, it's a fascinating subject, and you've sort of sold me on the idea of switching off and doing that. But of course, the one final question is, of all the things I could have asked you about retreats and their benefits, what should I have asked you?
Oh, good question. I guess along the lines of finding out, there's so many different retreats that you can go on. So I guess one question would be, how do I know that retreat's right for me?
Good question. Yeah, good point.
Do your homework on the retreat host. Make sure that they've got the credentials, particularly for doing things about mindset work or work on emotions and things like that. Just make sure you do a bit of homework and look them up. Anyone could probably run a retreat, but it's really important that whatever that person is offering in terms of retreat, that it aligns with what you need. My retreats are for women that are feeling frazzled and burnt out, exhausted, knackered mums, that sort of thing. But also, for women whose children have perhaps left home as well. But there are lots of other retreats. There are some more spiritual retreats. There are, I say, sort of outdoor sort of adventure retreats like mine as well. So we hike as well. So, there's lots of different areas that you can go into, but just make sure that it fits you and it aligns with what it is that you're after, for sure.
Well, there you go, folks. Retreats, do they make a difference? Of course, if you want to find out more about Dr. Kate and the various aspects of her retreats, do look up her website, which is on the show notes, which is womenandwild.co.uk. So until next time, folks, thanks very much for watching. Thanks very much for joining me, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.